What's up, guys? So recently I just made a checklist. Um, I just kind of made this checklist on what I do whenever I find a vehicle and how I approach every vehicle in a certain way when I inspect it. So this video, you guys can go back and look at it because y'all probably not a lot of you guys will be watching this live, but um, so I have 8 steps. Really 7 steps. The eighth step is negotiation. So 7 steps. So the first thing I do is I do a full walk around of the car. I look for dents, rust, fading, clear coat peeling, and then tire tread. Make sure the tires are good because that can be an expensive thing for the next buyer, and they will use that against you. But it shouldn't deter you if they are low. Um, Low tread. So I always check for dents, and make sure you stay calm. Walk around the whole vehicle, check for dents up on the lower half of the car. Sometimes people will overlook the whole lower half because they're staring, eye level around it. Rust will usually be towards the bottom of the car on a lot of vehicles, so people do overlook them. So what I would encourage you guys to do would be, like get below it, look at the frame, look underneath it, look underneath the doors. That it typically happens there. The fender wells, they happen above the wheels because salt from the roads or stuff like that gets thrown up by the tires, and that typically happens. Look for fading or clear coat peeling. All of the stuff that I'm talking about right now can be used as leverage. So if it does fail one of these steps, you can use that as leverage for the eighth step. Peeling and clear coat. Yeah. So depending on the vehicle, fading, depending on, if it's on a truck that's up high and it's on this, the roof, you might be able to talk to them about it, but it won't be depending on how bad it is, it can be, a minor deal. But, depending on the area, it could be a huge deal that you can actually use as leverage to get them down more. So for fluid leaks, this can be costly. So you need to be very careful. Let's see if I can get my light. No, maybe. This can be very, very costly if you buy a car and the leaks are more serious, or require more labor to fix, and they'll look the same. So what I mean is, if you guys have a car that has an oil leak underneath it towards the front of the car, and you can't really tell where it's coming from, and they're telling you it's the oil pan gasket. If that is true, it's about, a $30 gasket. You could probably change it yourself. You drain the oil, replace the gasket, put the pan back on. $30, very cheap. But if they're not telling the truth, it could be very hard to tell where it's coming from, and it could be, anything from like a rear main seal to all kinds of things. But if it's a rear main seal, which is the seal that's like around the it'd be, I'm trying to think how to explain it. I think it's the camshaft, but it's then it would look the same, but in order to change it, it's about at least $400 in labor, at least up to $1,000. And in order to change it, you have to remove the transmission. If it's four-wheel drive, you have to remove the transfer case and the front drive shaft, and it just becomes a whole process because of the labor. So really inspect that. If the fluid is pink, the fluid is transmission fluid, pink or red. If the fluid is black or brown, and engine oil is, usually like a see-through like gold, but as soon as it filters through the engine, it's usually black or brown, just because like the leftover residue in the engine, even if you change the oil. That's how you can tell if it's transmission fluid or oil. Also, power steering fluid is a pinkish color too, typically. Coolant would be, green or pink. I think it depends. But definitely look at that. Look for leaks. Look for, if it's a transmission leak, see if it's coming around the transmission, the pan, or if it's coming towards the front where it's mounted to the engine. Be very careful. This can be a very costly mistake if you buy a vehicle with an oil leak or a transmission leak, and they tell you they're gonna. I mean, a lot of people will tell you it's something simple. That's just the easiest way for them to get out of it. And just be very careful because that can eat up all of your profit. So after I would do this is all the exterior. I would check the tires, like I said, all that. Um, Go inside the car, check the interior. If it's cloth, look, all the stains, the rips mainly, I can usually get stains out. They even have carpet dye. So you can, get $6 to $8 worth of the dye paint and typically fix that. But check for rips because you can't really, I mean, you could sew it up, I guess, but check for rips because that can cost you on carpet. Leather, check for tears. Also, that will cost you. Um, any imperfections like that, you can always use that against them to negotiate. Uh, Make sure you roll up all the windows down. Check all the electronics. I've skipped over that countless times. Countless times. I get so excited. I don't roll up the back windows or the sunroof or something, and then there's an issue there. It's all. I mean, it's typically if the window doesn't roll up, it's going to be the window motor or the actuator 99% of the time. Not really a big deal. You can watch YouTube videos on how to fix it, but you can use that against them to leverage, like we were saying. Um, let's see about the AC. AC can be very costly to fix. That a lot of times they'll say no Freon, just add Freon. Well, in reality, why wouldn't like if that's true, then say, hey, let's meet at, AutoZone or wherever, a parts store, and say, let's put some in it and make sure it works. Because if the AC compressor doesn't work, it can be very expensive to fix. The hoses, it can be a tedious process. The compressor itself can be expensive. It can eat up your profit. So make sure the AC works. That is a very important thing. Um, Unless the car is insanely cheap. Phil just got one that was ridiculously cheap. So that was reasonable with no AC. But so test the radio, test the power seats. A lot of people overlook that. Every electronic cruise control, and make sure everything works. Um, when you are checking to see if there's internal knocking, ticking within the engine bay, start the engine, let it idle. Um, Make sure it's idle smooth. If you don't hear anything internally, just tick like a consistent tick at idle, a knock, but it's idling rough. The check engine light will be on 90% of the time. Plug the OBD2 scanner underneath the dash into it. It could be anything from a spark plug, on Fords, they have coil packs bad. It could be, minor things like that, but you need to make sure so that you can use it as leverage, but you can also fix it yourself or for somebody for, less than $100. Um, and they might not know that that's what it is. And that might actually help you to get a better deal. So make sure that it has a smooth idle, the ticking, the knocking. You do not want to deal with anything internally unless you are a mechanic and like that type of vehicle. The rough idle, yes. No internal noise. We need rough idle use code. Okay, test for a reliable, well-maintained transmission. My dad's transmission that he just got a used vehicle, and it was just kind of his daily driver. Just went out on him. And he overlooked this step. It drove fine. He's had it for about 6 months. It drove fine. But he did not put it at wide open throttle and shift through a gear. What I mean is transmissions are all it is hydraulic pressure and hoses and clutches. And they when they engage and disengage, they catch. So you can floor a vehicle, but if you don't shift through a whole gear, the transmission will be it's already engaged. The clutches are already together. They're probably not going to slip. But whenever you shift through a gear, they disengage and then re-engage. So you need to make sure that it catches and the clutch plates are still good on the transmission. So and he did not do that. And now he's having to pay $1,500 to have the transmission rebuilt. So it can be a very costly mistake. Make sure you definitely shift through completely at a under almost wide open throttle or wide open throttle through first or second or something, and make sure that it's got a good solid grab whenever you shift into the next gear, because it can be that can be a tricky thing that people think the transmission's good and it's not. Let's see. Okay. Um, Always get up to highway speeds. Make sure that overdrive works. I've seen countless cars at the car auction where overdrive is out. It's kind of hard to tell because the last gear will work, overdrive won't, and you might think, hey, this car's going down the freeway at 3,000 RPMs, and it seems a little high on the tack. It could be overdrive, it could be like overdrive could be out and it just be in the last gear, fourth or fifth gear. So, or third gear. Um, so always make sure you get to highway speeds. It shifts smoothly through all the gears. Um, let's see, check the RPMs. Like I said, make sure they don't shoot up. That means the transmission is slipping, trying to catch those clutches, and the RPMs are slipping. Or the transmission is slipping and the RPMs are revving up. When checking steering, always go back and forth and listen for a whining sound. It will be, like sometimes they have a minor one and that's okay, but this will be very noticeable. You can almost feel it in the steering, like it's not assisting. The power steering is not assisting like it should, and the pump could be going out. That could be a costly fix also because the process of removing and installing a new one, depending on the vehicle. The fluid for power steering is also reddish, I believe, pinkish, and check to see if it's leaking. If it's got a power steering leak, you will see it around the canister, more than likely, or the hoses, and it could be low on power steering due to a leak. When driving down the road, check for play. When you drive straight, and if the car's old and you can drive straight and you can wiggle the wheel and the car not move at all, that would be play in the steering. There are ways to fix this on some vehicles. There is a nut on the steering box, and you can tighten it. If you over tighten it, it can lock up your steering. So I would advise someone to have a professional do it. But there are ways to fix it on some vehicles. But you can also use this as a negotiation tactic, because that is a very common thing that happens with older cars. When you return, let it idle. The reason you would let it idle is to make sure the temperature of the vehicle is in the middle, not getting hot. You don't want it to be moving because it's getting air and it's colder, or it's air cooled. But if you let it idle for just a minute after you've driven it, you've already got wide open throttle. So it's definitely been up to, correct temperature it should have. You don't want to buy a car that's been overheated. You also need to smell for burning oil. That can be like a rare case, especially on newer cars, but I've seen it happen all the time where the car looks great. I love it. I'm driving it at the auction, and you let it sit and you can just smell oil burning coming through the vents, or maybe just a little bit of smoke when you open the hood after it's idling, and you can smell it. And that's just because it could be the oil hasn't been changed enough. It's been ran low of oil. There's many factors, but it just goes to show that the previous owner didn't maintain it well and that you should probably stay away from it. there are ways to hide this, which people have tried to do to me, which is put small in like small engine oil in the car, which is 20W50. It's like airplane oil, and it's like a lawnmower oil. Really weird, but they've done it, and there's shady ways around it. So be careful. You can also learn to check the thickness and to see if that's what someone has done. And it feels like maple syrups, how thick it is, but it's just too thick for the engine to burn. So always be aware of that. That probably happens way more down here on budget cars at the auction. Probably won't happen to you guys. So don't really worry about that. After all this, start the negotiation process. If any of these, if this checklist has failed, some steps or the car has within the checklist, acknowledge that, sound really interested, talk to the guy, tell him all the issues that you had found, and let them know that, hey, this is the problem, and would you take this because I'm gonna have to fix this, and I don't know how much exactly it's gonna cost, but I really still want to buy it. So that's what I have for the checklist, man. And I hope you guys use this, print it off. If you think that it's helpful, you don't have to use it. There's no correct way. If you guys need any more information, comment, message in the group chat on the main chat, and I will be glad to answer any questions about this. Have a great day. I will see you guys later.